Well, I'm Dr. Suraj. I'm engaging class on corticosteroids. First, coming to its online, I'll be the engaging class in the following fashion. First, coming to the anatomy of the adrenal cortex, physiology of biosynthesis of adrenal steroids, then later on coming to its mechanism of actions, its physiological and pharmacological actions, and their pharmacokinetics and the preparations available, their indications, the toxicities and the contraindications of various steroids, and lastly the recent advances. Let me first start with the anatomy. We know that histologically the adrenal cortex is divided into three zones. The outer layer, the outermost layer is known as zona glomerulosa. The middle one is known as zona fasciculata, and the inner one is known as zona reticularis. Zona reticularis. However, the predominant enzyme which is present on the glomerulosa is, or more specifically present on the glomerulosa, is aldosterone synthase, which is also known as CYP11B2, which is responsible for the synthesis of aldosterone. However, ACTH, which is secreted from the anterior pituitary, can have a role in stimulating the zona glomerulosa. However, the synthesis of aldosterone is predominantly controlled by angiotensin II and potassium levels. ACTH acts predominantly on zona fasciculata and reticularis through its receptor known as melanocortin 2 receptor, that is MC2R receptor, which are predominantly expressed in these two layers, that is in middle and inner layer of the adrenal cortex. However, the ACTH stimulation on the fasciculata and reticularis through receptor with the tissue specificity expression of these two enzymes, that is 11 beta hydroxylase and CYP17 or 17 hydroxylase, is responsible for the synthesis of cortisol. Reticularis is with the tissue specific expression of cytochrome 17 or 17 alpha hydroxylase, is responsible for the conversion of 21 steroid form to 19 carbon steroid, that is DHEA, that is dihydroepiandrosterone. Medulla is responsible for the synthesis of epinephrine and norepinephrine. Now, if you see the biosynthesis of steroids, which is regulated by various enzymes, the synthesis of steroids are basically divided into three pathways, that is mineralocorticoid pathways, glucocorticoid pathway, and sex hormone pathway. Coming to its first pathway, mineralocorticoid pathway, for all these steroids, cholesterol acts as a precursor, which is a 21 carbon atom, which in the presence of side chain cleavage enzyme gets converted into pregnenolone. Okay, so this conversion of cholesterol to the pregnenolone is controlled by the angiotensin II, even as well as ACTH, depending upon the levels of aldosterone and cortisol. However, the enzyme which is responsible for the conversion of cholesterol to pregnenolone is side chain cleavage enzyme. And this pregnenolone, in the presence of various enzymes, that is beta dehydrogenase, 21 beta hydroxylase, and 11 beta hydroxylase, is converted into corticosterone. And the blue boxes in the picture represents the endogenous steroids. Now this corticosterone is once again in the presence of aldosterone synthase, in the glomerulosa, is converted into aldosterone. And this aldosterone synthesis is predominantly controlled by the or regulated by the angiotensin 2 levels. However, the drugs which are available which can control the overall synthesis of steroids, that is aminoglutamide, can inhibit all the pathways, that is mineralocorticoid, glucocorticoid, and the sex hormone pathway. Okay, coming on to the next, the steroid or glucocorticoid pathway, that is pregnenolone in the presence of 17 alpha hydroxylase is converted to its pregnenolone form, 17 alpha hydroxy pregnenolone, and in the presence of various other enzymes like 3 beta dehydrogenase, 21 beta hydroxylase, and 11 beta hydroxylase is converted into hydrocortisone, which once again in the presence of 11 beta dehydrogenase is converted into cortisone, which is the predominant endogenous glucocorticoids. The other important pathway is the last pathway, that is sex hormone pathway, wherein the 21 carbon atom in the presence of enzymes are converted into dehydroepiandrosterone, and this in the presence of 3 beta dehydrogenase is converted into androstenedione, and in the periphery it is converted into testosterones and then estrogens, that is estradiol, estriol, and estrone. Now if you see the importance of this pathway and then the pharmaceutical preparations, you can see that the various preparations can control the synthesis of different pathways. Like for example, aminoglutamide controlling all the synthesis by inhibiting a very first enzyme, that is the rate limiting step in this steroid synthesis. However, if you see, metapyron controls at the level of 11 beta hydroxylase, and then carbenoxolone, which controls the synthesis of glucocorticoids by inhibiting the 11 beta dehydrogenase, which may be used in the treatment of Cushing's syndromes. Now coming to the hypothalamus pituitary axis, the corticotropin releasing factors is released from the hypothalamus from the various factors. For example, neural factors. There may be some stress in the form of some injuries, or road traffic accident, or hypoglycemia. Okay, these all acts as a stimulus to the hypothalamus, which releases the corticotropin releasing factor, which acts upon the corticotropes on the anterior pituitary, which is responsible for the release of ACTH, which acts upon the adrenal cortex, and this ACTH acts on the melanocortin 2 receptors on the fasciculata and reticularis, and in fasciculata particularly to increase the synthesis of glucocorticoids, and then on the mineralocorticoid to increase the synthesis of aldosterone, though it has less action on the glomerulosa. Now these two, that is in particular, the glucocorticoids has a negative feedback mechanism at two levels, that is at the anterior pituitary, and its effect on the hypothalamus is known as long negative feedback loop. However, there is one more loop which is short negative feedback loop, that is the increased level of ACTH can inhibit at the level of hypothalamus, which is known as short negative feedback loop. Now, if you consider, whenever there is an HPA axis suppression because of excessive endogenous ACTH, or probably because of some synthetic ACTH, can lead to atrophy of the adrenal cortex. Now, if you remove the anterior pituitary, can you tell me which is the major histological zone of an adrenal cortex which is mostly affected. If your answer is fasciculata and glomerulosa, you are in the right direction, because the glomerulosa is predominantly controlled by the angiotensin and extracellular potassium level. Now coming to the how steroids acts at the level of receptor. The free form of the steroids enters into a cytoplasm, that is, the glucocorticoid receptors normally are occupied with the proteins which are known as heat shock proteins. Now once the glucocorticoids enters and binds to the glucocorticoid receptors, these heat shock proteins are detached from the glucocorticoid receptors, and then these glucocorticoid receptors along with the steroids enters into the nucleus and goes and binds to the DNA component, that is glucocorticoid responsive element or response element. Now, however, the effect of the glucocorticoids at the level of DNA varies depending upon the transcription factors which it activates or inhibits. Now, once it goes and binds to a transcription factors and mostly acts at the level of metabolic, those are known as glucocorticoid transactivation. So sometimes it may go and bind to a glucocorticoid responsive element which may inhibit the genes, transcription genes, which may be responsible for its most of its anti-inflammatory and immunosuppressive property, which we call it as transrepression. So however, the transrepression, which is responsible for the anti-inflammatory and immunosuppressive activity, is mostly because of its ability to inhibit the expression of cyclooxygenase 2 enzyme and nitric oxide synthase by binding to various transcription genes like apoptosis gene, like cyclooxygenase gene, and then the gene responsible for the expression of nitric oxide synthase 2, and then by binding to an annexin. So this is what you basically see, the metabolic changes, that is by transactivation, and then the anti-inflammatory and immunosuppressive action because of its transrepression property of steroids. Now, however, if you see the mineralocorticoids, that is predominantly aldosterone, when it enters into the cytosol of a cell, now this is predominantly the cell, what it acts on is the principal cells of the distal convoluted or the collecting tubules. Okay, the early part of collecting tubules wherein the epithelial sodium channels are expressed. However, mineralocorticoid, similar to glucocorticoid, goes and binds to its receptor, which is known as mineralocorticoid receptors. Normally, these are occupied with heat shock proteins. So whenever this mineralocorticoid receptor goes and binds, it detaches the heat shock proteins and enters into the nucleus and binds to a hormone responsive element, which makes some transcriptional changes and helps in the formation of various proteins. One of the predominant protein which is expressed or which helps in increasing its synthesis is epithelial sodium channel. It not only increases the expression but also the synthesis and the translocation of the epithelial sodium channel, and then to express on the cell membrane of the distal convoluted tubule cells. Now if you see this picture on the right hand side, now what happens normally is the expression of the epithelial sodium channel on the principal cells. It allows the sodium to enter from the tubule into the cell. Since the sodium is absorbed in such a large number of quantity, it has to maintain the electroneutrality on both the side. So in order to do that, K plus is also exchanged with the sodium. But however, only K plus when exchanged with the sodium is not sufficient to maintain the electroneutrality, because the expression of sodium channel is such large number which may be difficult for only potassium to maintain the electroneutrality. Therefore, from the intercalated cells, which is not shown in the picture, even H plus, that is protons, are exchanged along with the sodium in order to maintain the electroneutrality. Therefore, you will see that when the sodium is absorbed at the level of distal convoluted tubule, K plus and H plus are exchanged against the sodium to maintain the electroneutrality. So therefore, you will see that in the condition where there is excess of aldosterone is released, that is primary aldosteronism, you will see the patient presents with the hypertension because of its increased property of retaining the sodium as well as water, passive absorption of water. And then you will see there is a loss of potassium, that is hypokalemia, and there is a loss of proton which may lead to metabolic alkalosis. And coming to the pharmacological actions of corticosteroids, coming first to the mineralocorticoid. Aldosterone is the predominant and the endogenous hormone. However, the pharmaceutical preparations available are deoxycorticosterones and fludrocortisone. We know that it is predominantly synthesized from the outermost layer of the adrenal cortex, which is known as glomerulosa, and predominantly the aldosterone synthesis is controlled by the angiotensin 2 and K plus. However, ACTH has a minor role, and a moderate stimulation helps in the release of aldosterone. So therefore, in the previous picture, you must have observed that aldosterone has no role in the feedback control of ACTH secretion. Now, coming to the extension of the effects, under the control of renin-angiotensin system, this promotes the reabsorption of sodium from the distal part of the DCT and the collecting tubule, what we saw in earlier slides. It is in exchange with the K plus and the H plus ion by acting on the receptor, that is mineralocorticoid receptors. Okay, now this condition we have already seen that what happens if there is excessive synthesis of mineralocorticoid, which leads to hypokalemia, metabolic alkalosis because of the loss of H plus ions, and increased plasma volume, probably because of the increased sodium absorption, and then which is responsible for the hypertension. Okay, then the pharmaceutical preparation which is widely used in the treatment of acute adrenal insufficiency is fludrocortisone, and this has both glucocorticoid and the mineralocorticoid activity. But however, mineralocorticoid activity is more when compared to its glucocorticoid activity. Therefore, because of this two property it carries, it is used in the treatment of adrenocortical insufficiency, because it might sometimes be associated with the mineralocorticoid deficiency. Okay, because of its mineralocorticoid property, it is used in adrenocortical insufficiency. Now coming to the glucocorticoids, that is the predominant hormone is cortisol. Its pharmacological actions are two, that is one, the direct actions which are dose related, and its permissive actions. Now these glucocorticoids are responsible for increasing the effects of catecholamines on the vascular bloods, that is vasopressor effects of the catecholamines is enhanced in the presence of glucocorticoids, and the catecholamine action on the bronchial smooth muscles, that is to cause bronchodilation, is enhanced by the presence of glucocorticoid. So therefore we call these actions of glucocorticoids as permissive actions. Similarly, the catecholamine effects on the lipolytic actions is enhanced by the presence of glucocorticoid. Now coming on to the other actions of glucocorticoids. Now, metabolic effects, that is on the glucose and protein metabolism, fat, water, and calcium metabolism. The other effects, let us see in detail, that is anti-inflammatory and immunosuppressive actions. Its actions on the skeletal muscles, cardiovascular system, CNS, stomach, and formed blood cells. And if you see the most of the metabolic changes which happens, it is because of its action on the transcriptional factors, which leads to transactivation. If you see overall on the carbohydrate metabolism and the protein metabolism, the major objective of glucocorticoid is to maintain the nutrition of the vital organ, especially brain and heart, during starvation. Now, how does it does is in the liver, it increases the synthesis of glucose, and then it causes glycogen deposit in the liver. Now, how does this occurs is at the level of peripheral utilization, it decreases the glucose utilization and increases the protein breakdown and activates the lipolysis. Now, what happens? Increased protein breakdown, that is the amino acid end product, and the glycerol are the precursor for the gluconeogenesis. Okay, and also it is also responsible, that is glucocorticoids are also responsible for the enhancing or expressing the glucose synthesis pathway enzymes, that is glucose 6 phosphatase, which is responsible for the gluconeogenesis. So what happens? The net effect of this at the level of circulation is it causes increased in blood sugar level, that is hyperglycemia. So therefore you will see that this may worsen glycemic index or the glycemic control in the diabetic mellitus patients. Now, coming to its action on the fat metabolism, we have already seen that it enhances the effect of catecholamines on the lipase and responsible for the lipolysis, which we call it as an permissive effect. The other effect which you see on the fat metabolism is redistribution of the body fat, that is from the periphery to the central. So you see mostly in case of, when you give excess of glucocorticoids, which may be responsible for Cushingoid like symptoms or a syndrome, Cushing syndrome, which is responsible for this distribution of the fat, which may be responsible for this increased deposition of the fat on the face, which we call it as a moon face, and on the back, buffalo hump, etc. Now, why do you see this changes? This is probably attributable to the actions, of the insulin and its sensitivity towards, truncal or the adipose tissue rather. If you see the central tissue, adipose tissue, that is the truncal adipose tissues are more sensitive to the action of insulin. So therefore, probably a reason for redistribution of the fat from the peripheral, which are less sensitive to the insulin, and the central, that is the adipose tissue in the central part of the body, are more sensitive to the actions of insulin. Probably that's the reason that you see the redistribution of the body fat even in case of drug induced Cushing syndrome. Its action on the calcium metabolism, overall it decreases the intestinal absorption and enhances the renal excretion of the calcium, and also it is responsible for the loss of osteoid tissue. Probably its action on its decreased blastic activity on the and increased osteoclastic activity, which may be in long term is responsible for the osteoporosis. And sometimes when these drugs are given for the the pharmaceutical preparations of these steroids, that is glucosteroids, may be responsible for avascular necrosis of the femur, sometimes involving even the femoral head, and can cause a major morbidity. Coming to its anti-inflammatory actions, the anti-inflammatory actions is mostly attributable to its action on the transcription factors, that is which we call it as a trans repression, and at the level of gene, it reduces the expression of the COX-2, that is cyclooxygenase and nitric oxide synthase expression, as well as a pro-inflammatory cytokines, that is interleukin 1, 6, and tumor necrosis factor alpha. However, because of its action on this level, it also decreases or suppresses the level of cytokines, chemokines, and other mediators of the inflammation. It is also known to concentrate the neutrophils in the circulation, probably by decreasing the expression of the adhesion molecules. And overall, it is known to decrease the capillary permeability, cellular infiltration at the site of injury, and then collagen deposition, fibroblastic activity, and then decreasing its scar formation. Therefore, probably for these reasons, it is used in the treatment of bad scars even. That is intralesional injection of triamcinolone, a glucocorticoid preparation used in scars treatment. If you see, it's immunosuppressive. It is once again attributed to its transuppression activity, that is reduced proliferation of lymphocyte, that is because of its reduced secretion of the interleukin 2, its ability to decrease the secretion of interleukin 2 from various inflammatory cells, and then by activating the apoptosis of the lymphocytes. Okay, the second effect would be it also decreases the circulating lymphocytic count, probably by its action on the lymphoid tissue. So overall, if you see, its action on the cell mediated immunity is more, the ability to decrease the cell mediated immunity is more than the humoral immunity, probably the reason why it is used in case of graft rejection. So therefore, if you see, in the normal individual and the cortisol treated individuals, what is the difference in the WBC? That is, in the total count is, it is increased slightly in cortisol treated. The neutrophil polymorpho nuclear neutrophil is increased. Lymphocyte level is decreased. Eosinophil is sequestered in the tissues in the spleen, and then basophil similarly it is sequestered in the spleen. It is, see the changes in 60 to 30, and then monocytes it is increased, and its other effects on red blood cells, it is known to increase the number of RBCs. Then platelets, probably for the reason it is used in case of autoimmune hemolytic anemia and ITP. These are the changes or its effect on the RBC and PMN, that is on the neutrophil, to increase its effect. It increases its level. Coming to its action on the skeletal muscles, yes, of course, when it is used excessive dose or for the chronic duration, it is known to cause muscle wasting. Mostly the proximal muscles are involved, and this is known as steroid myopathy. On the CNS, the glucocorticoid, can cause insomnia, mania, or sometimes can also cause depressions and increased motor activity. Probably this is the reason you'll see the insufficiency of this, seeing some CNS changes in Cushing syndromes in the form of, psychosis even. In the GIT on stomach, it is known to cause peptic ulcer, that is by suppressing the local immune response against the H. pylori and by decreasing the prostaglandin synthesis. And in the existing peptic ulcer, it is known to increase the chances of perforation and hence bleeding. Its role on the fetal lung is to promote the fetal lung maturation. Therefore, you see the synthetic preparation of glucocorticoids like betamethasone or dexamethasone is used in premature labor to promote the fetal lung maturation and then to prevent the it is it is known to decrease the incidence and the complication of respiratory distress syndrome by promoting the fetal lung maturation, and also it is known to decrease the intraventricular hemorrhage. The other actions of the glucocorticoids on the formed elements of blood that we already seen in that table, it decreases the lymphocytes, eosinophil and basophil, probably by sequestering in the tissues like spleen tissues, and then it activates the apoptosis of the lymphocytes. Therefore, the rationale for using of glucocorticoids in the lymphoid malignancy, that is, it is known to activate the lympho uh, apoptosis of the lymphocytes. However, it increases the number of RBCs, platelets, and the neutrophil in the circulation. And that's the reason it's used in autoimmune hemolytic anemia and in case of ITP, that is immune thrombocytopenic purpura. This is the pharmacokinetic properties. Let us see. Most of them are orally and which are given are readily absorbed from the GIT, and once they're absorbed and distributed in the circulation, 90% of the absorbed steroids goes and binds to a plasma protein which is known as corticosteroid binding globulin, and the remainder, from 5%, 5 to 8% goes and binds to the albumin. They can also be administered by different routes of administration, like intravenously, intramuscularly, intra-articularly in some condition like rheumatoid arthritis and osteoarthritis, topically in some of the dermatological condition, or aerosol formulation in some of the respiratory condition. Let us see what are those. It is metabolized predominantly in the liver by the cytochrome P450 enzyme system and excreted by the renal system. However, the half-life of the adrenal steroid may increase dramatically in the individuals with the hepatic dysfunction. Therefore, we need to also take into consideration, that is, the precursor form of the steroids, whether to give in the hepatic dysfunctions or not, because obviously in hepatic dysfunction the active form has to be given because the enzyme system is already damaged. Coming to the classification, yeah, corticosteroids are divided into, mainly the glucocorticoids and the mineralocorticoids. The glucocorticoids are once again divided into, short acting, intermediate acting, and long acting, depending upon their duration of action. That is, short acting, we mean to say, which acts for 8 to 12 hours of duration, and intermediate acting, like prednisone, prednisolone, methylprednisolone, and triamcinolone for 12 to 36 hours, and the longer acting like betamethasone and the dexamethasone, which acts for 36 to 72 hours. Okay. Another changes, if you see these drugs, they may have both glucocorticoid as well as the mineralocorticoid activity. However, if you see these three, that is triamcinolone, and betamethasone and dexamethasone, they have zero mineralocorticoid activity. So therefore, the anti-inflammatory activity, the drug which has most is betamethasone and the dexamethasone. Mineralocorticoid, okay, fludrocortisone and deoxycorticosterone acetate are available as a pharmaceutical preparation with some glucocorticoid and mineralocorticoid activity, but predominantly a mineralocorticoid activity of fludrocortisone makes it to be used in case of acute adrenal insufficiency with mineralocorticoid deficiency. And then this DOCA, that is deoxycorticosterone acetate, has predominant activity, or rather it has only activity on the mineralocorticoid. Let us see some general guidance when you start treating with glucocorticoids. Generally, this has to be given only for less than 2 weeks, because a long-term administration will see a lot of metabolic changes, and the chances of having HPA suppression has to be taken into consideration whenever these drugs are given for more than 2 weeks. Okay. Or if the condition arises, is to be given it for long-term administration, the dose has to be minimum and adequate dose has to be given. Okay. And we need to also take into consideration, like beta blockers, even glucocorticoid shouldn't be withdrawn abruptly because of the flare up of existing reaction, or can lead to HPA axis suppression. So, okay, any stress during the course of therapy for any condition, the dose of these steroids has to be increased, and most often is to consider the local therapy, like in the form of topical or some intra-articular injections, or maybe inhalational has to be considered rather than systemic therapy to prevent the its effect on the systemic level. Basically, the uses of glucocorticoids are divided into replacement therapy and its non-endocrine uses. In the replacement therapy, it is usually in the deficiency states. Like in endocrine disorders, we will see what are those deficiency states, like acute adrenocortical insufficiency or chronic adrenocortical insufficiency and congenital adrenal hyperplasia. Sorry, CAH. And there are other various uses which is because of its property anti-inflammatory and immunosuppressive are used in other various non-endocrine disorders. Now coming to its uses and replacement therapy in Addison's disease. What is Addison's disease is? It's a chronic adrenocortical deficiency state, and in this any minor stress it can lead to acute adrenocortical deficiency and patient may collapse. However, because of the decrease in the glucocorticoid synthesis, there is a replacement required in this condition in the form of hydrocortisone, which can be given as 20 to 30 milligram daily. And during any stress, the dose of this has to be increased, which we discussed earlier. And the deficiency of mineralocorticoid is usually noted by its decrease in hydration or hypotension or increase in potassium level. So therefore, it has to be supplied by mineralocorticoid if need arises, that is in the form of fludrocorticosterol. It's an emergency condition, that is acute adrenocortical deficiency state, and this has to be addressed very early. That is by giving intravenous hydrocortisone in the form of 100 milligram IV 8th hourly. So these are the important indications as a replacement therapy in case of Addison's and acute adrenocortical deficiency. Coming to its third indication, that is in case of congenital adrenal hyperplasia. As a replacement therapy in case of congenital adrenal hyperplasia, the most common enzyme responsible for this adrenal hyperplasia is because of the deficiency of 21 beta hydroxylase, which controls the synthesis of corticosterone as well as the cortisol. Okay, that is the major glucocorticoid. The other enzyme which is also responsible less commonly to cause adrenal hyperplasia is 11 beta hydroxylase deficiency. Now if you see, once there is a deficiency of this enzyme, the glucocorticoid, that is cortisol, is not produced, which may make the pathway to shift from the glucocorticoid pathway to the sex steroid pathway. So therefore, you will see that a female fetus carrying the deficiency of 21 beta hydroxylase, if not treated by dexamethasone, at proper time, it may have increased DHEA, that is dehydroepiandrosterone, that is androgens, which may be responsible for the virilization in the female fetus. So therefore, the importance of identifying and then preventing with the treatment of dexamethasone as soon as less than 10 weeks of gestation is of utmost importance. If the baby is male, then we need not continue the dexamethasone treatment. Okay, fine. Okay, usually the hyperplasia of adrenal is usually because of excess of ACTH. Why there is excess of ACTH? Because there is a deficiency of the cortisol. So therefore, there is a excess of ACTH is released. Since the increased ACTH is released, and then there is a deficiency of 21 beta hydroxylase or 11 beta hydroxylase, the final product, that is cortisol, endogenous cortisol, is not produced, but only it can cause hyperplasia and the hypertrophy of the adrenal tissues. So therefore, this becomes an utmost important for the treatment of newborns. The maintenance therapy has to be given in case of in the form of hydrocortisone to decrease the ACTH, which is responsible for action on the adrenal cortex and may be responsible for its direction towards the sex steroid pathway. So therefore, a prophylactic, dexamethasone in pregnancy is of utmost importance if they detected or the fetus carrying this deficiency of this 21 beta hydroxylase may develop CAH. So therefore, the dexamethasone has to be started as early as 10 weeks of gestation. If the female fetus is identified, then the therapy has to be continued till delivery because of the chances of virilization. Okay. Now let us see other non-endocrine uses of steroids. Coming to its first use, there is allergic reactions. Mostly it is used in so many allergic reactions, like in case of angioneurotic edema, bee stings, contact dermatitis. Okay, but however, glucocorticoid steroids, glucocorticoids, since they act at the level of DNA or the nuclear receptors, usually the time taken is it is delayed. So therefore, in case of severe allergic reactions, epinephrine and antihistaminics comes as an early rescuer than steroids. So it's rational of using in case of allergic reaction. Of course, it is because of its anti-inflammatory actions. In case of collagen vascular disease, it is used in various disorders like giant cell arteritis, lupus erythematosus, in connective tissue disorders. Okay, in eye conditions, they are used in acute uveitis, allergic conjunctivitis, choroiditis, and optic neuritis. Yeah, probably for the same reason, because of its anti-inflammatory properties. There is a tricky of using the steroids, for various eye disorders, because if the topical glucocorticoid steroids are given for a long term, it may sometimes be associated with increased intraocular pressure. Sometimes even in the normal eyes it can cause, and it can exacerbate the intraocular hypertension in a patient with antecedent glaucoma. And the problem is the glaucoma is not always reversible on cessation of the glucocorticoid therapy. So intraocular pressure should be monitored whenever the glucocorticoid are applied to the eyes for more than 2 weeks. Okay, but however, if you see, these glucocorticoids are contraindicated in case of some infections like herpes simplex, keratitis, because the progression of the disease may lead to irreversible clouding of the cornea. There are some other has to be taken into consideration, especially in case of eye related injuries. Topical steroid should not be given in the treatment of in case of mechanical lacerations and abrasions of the eyes, because they may tend to delay the healing and promote the development and the spread of infections. Now let us see its indication in the GI conditions. Is mostly used in case of inflammatory bowel disease, like in chronic ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease, and they're most useful whenever there is an acute exacerbation of this above condition. Okay, but however, sometimes it's a double-edged sword. Glucocorticoid may mask the signs and symptoms of the complications such as intestinal perforation and peritonitis, which may sometimes be seen in case of as a major complication of ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease. Hematologic disorders, as is like there are conditions like autoimmune hemolytic anemia. Probably it is known to decrease the breakdown of RBCs and then to increase the number of RBCs. Acute allergic purpura, leukemia and lymphoma, probably its action to activate the apoptosis. And then autoimmune hemolytic anemia, idiopathic thrombocytic purpura, and then as an anti-inflammatory property in case of multiple myeloma. Systemic inflammation, because of its anti-inflammatory property, it is used in case of ARDS, that is acute respiratory distress syndrome. In various infections, once again, it has a double-edged sword. Yeah, when to use in case of infections, mostly used in case of, once again, in case of acute respiratory distress syndrome, and yeah, and sepsis, because of the cytokine storm, and it tend to reduce the effect of the cytokines, so therefore might be helpful in the treatment of shock. Inflammatory conditions and of bones and joints like arthritis, direct into the joints, like intra-articular injections can be given to decrease the inflammation. Bursitis similarly, and tenosynovitis directly into the tendons to decrease the inflammatory process. Nausea and vomiting related to chemotherapy and general anesthesia. Yes, dexamethasone is known to reduce the tendency of vomiting in case of cancer chemotherapy induced vomiting. Mostly have a role in case of delayed onset of cancer chemotherapy induced. Some of the neurological disorders which are responsible for cerebral edema, they need to have a treatment with steroids which has no mineralocorticoid activity. That is, a large doses of dexamethasone are given to a patients following brain surgery to minimize the cerebral edema in post-operative period, or in some cases of multiple steroids. Yeah, probably why? Because dextrosterone and betamethasone are preferred is because they don't have any mineralocorticoid activity, which could have exacerbated the existing cerebral edema. It is also used in various organ transplant to prevent and for the treatment of rejection because of its immunosuppressive property and its predominantly action on the cell-mediated immunity. Pulmonary diseases, like in case of aspiration, pneumonia, we have seen its extensive use in the bronchial asthma, that is the inhalational steroids in the form of beclomethasone, dipropionate, triamcinolone, fluticasone, and flunisolide. They are usually, or budesonide. They are used as an inhalational steroid to reduce the use of oral corticosteroids. One of the important use of this inhaled glucocorticoids are it is known to reduce the bronchial hyperreactivity with less suppression on the adrenal function when compared to oral glucocorticoids. Second, it is also known to increase the expression of beta receptors. Therefore, some of the steroids are combined with the beta-2 stimulants or agonists in the treatment of asthma. And the problem with inhalational steroids, you'll see that it may cause dysphonia and oropharyngeal candidiasis because of the deposition of the drug in the oral cavity. However, it can be decreased by using the spacers and the mouth rinsing. Renal disorders, mostly in the treatment of nephrotic syndrome, probably because of minimal change disease, which is well established, used both in the adults and the children. Skin disorders in atopic dermatitis, in life-threatening condition like pemphigus vulgaris, psoriasis, and seborrheic dermatitis and xerosis can be used. Thyroid disorders like malignant exophthalma, subacute thyroiditis, and in miscellaneous conditions like hypocalcemia, because of its action on calcium metabolism, we saw it decreases the absorption of the glucose from the intestine and promotes the excretion of calcium in the renal system, and its effect on decreasing the ICT, and then let us see the toxicity of corticosteroids. They're basically divided into two. One, its effect on the abrupt withdrawal, and then effect on chronic use. Its effect on the abrupt withdrawal, we mostly see the most frequent problem with abrupt withdrawal of any steroids is to flare up the underlying diseases. Then the most severe form of abrupt withdrawal is acute adrenal insufficiency. And then rarely, sometimes it can cause increased in intracranial tension and then papilledema, that is pseudotumor cerebri. However, on the long use, the suppression of HPA axis has to be anticipated if the treatment is for more than 2 weeks or for the large doses. The behavioral disturbances like in the form of insomnia, or mania, sometimes depression or psychosis, even cataract. Yeah, cataract, there is a special mention. It is mostly tend to cause a posterior subcapsular cataract, which is related to the dosage and the duration of therapy. And children are particularly at risk. Therefore, any steroids, topical steroids which are given for more than 2 weeks, a slit lamp examination has to be done to detect the glucocorticoid induced posterior subcapsular cataracts. Glaucoma is, yeah, as I said, like glaucoma, the reason is exactly not known, but it may tend to increase the intraocular pressure in normal individuals or can exacerbate the intraocular hypertension in case of even antecedent glaucoma patients. So therefore, the care has to be taken when this has to be administered for long-term duration. Peptic ulcers, yes, because of its ability to decrease the prostaglandin synthesis and then preventing or impairing the wound healing. Hyperglycemia and yeah, probably it worsens the diabetic status of an individual by its ability to enhance the gluconeogenesis and in decreasing the peripheral utilization of the glucose. And long-term administration is also known to cause the Cushing syndrome. Hypertension, probably, those steroids which have some mineralocorticoid activity are responsible for the retention of sodium and water, responsible for hypertension and fluid and electrolyte abnormalities. Once again, with increase in sodium and hypokalemia because of increased aldosterone level, then metabolic alkalosis changes, increased susceptibility inflammation of increased susceptibility to infection, probably because of its anti-inflammatory. Once again, because of its ability to decrease the expression of adhesion molecules or decreasing the activity of monocytes as well as macrophages by inhibiting their activity. Osteoporotic changes, of course, the long-term administration and the dosage determines its effect on the osteoblastic and osteoclastic activity. However, the glucocorticoid preferably affects the trabecular bone and the cortical rim of the vertebral bodies. There are many mechanisms. As we discussed, it is known to diminish the gastrointestinal absorption of the calcium, its suppressive effect on the osteoblast, and increasing the effect of resorption, that is on osteoclast. Yeah. So therefore, when these drugs are given for long run, they are given calcium along with that. Some may advocate the maintaining the calcium intake of 1500 milligram per day by diet plus calcium supplementation and vitamin D intake of 400 international unit per day may be helpful. Another effect you can see, osteonecrosis. It is also known as avascular necrosis or the aseptic necrosis. And the most frequent bone involved is femoral head, but sometimes can affect even humeral head and the distal femur. And they usually present as development of a pain abruptly in the hip or the shoulder in case of humeral head, or the knee pain in case of distal femur. Once again, it is related to the increased duration and the dose of the glucocorticoid therapy. Growth arrest, yes, of course, it is known to decrease the collagen synthesis and arrest the linear growth in case of children's, and yeah, can be restored by the retreatment, or by the treatment with the growth hormone. And this steroids, during antenatal exposure in some of the animal experiment have also shown have a clearly linked to the cleft palate and altered neuronal development. So they may have some complex behavioral abnormalities. Therefore, the care has to be taken when giving steroids antenatally. And then its effect on the skeletal muscle, that is, it can cause long-term administration, can cause steroid myopathy, especially affecting the proximal limb. What are the contraindications? Of course, we have seen its healing effect, impaired healing effect, and decreasing the prostaglandin synthesis, therefore can exacerbate the peptic ulcer, worsen the state of diabetic status, probably by its effect on the glucose metabolism by increasing the blood sugar level. Hypertension, some of the glucocorticoids having mineralocorticoid can retain the sodium and water. Viral and fungal infection, of course, in some of the viral, herpes simplex, we have seen it can cause worsening. Tuberculosis, it can, because of its immunosuppressive activity, can reactivate the dormant form, can cause, exacerbation of the tuberculosis, and also intestinal tuberculosis, it can cause perforation. Okay, pre-existing osteoporosis, of course, we have seen its effect on the calcium metabolism, that is to decrease the calcium absorption and promoting the uh, calcium excretion through kidney. So therefore, it becomes a contraindication in osteoporosis. Herpes simplex keratitis, it's again, and pre-existing psychosis can be worsened because of its effect on the CNS functions. Let us see some of the recent advances of in this section. Pesiritide, it's a pharmaceutical preparation which acts on a somatostatin receptor, that is SSTR5, which is mostly abundant on the corticotropes. And then by acting on this, it is known to decrease the ACTH secretion. Hence, it is used for the recurrent or the non-resectable ACTH secreting adenomas. Of late, deflazacort, a newer steroid, which is recently approved for the treatment of DMD, that is Duchenne muscular dystrophy. In this condition, the children which are affected, they die mostly of respiratory paralysis as early as 20 years of age. Then this deflazacort has some role in improving the muscle tone in case of Duchenne muscular dystrophy. Thank you. Now let us see some of the MCQs. Let us see if we can correlate with the existing knowledge. Coming to the first MCQ, in the treatment of congenital adrenal hyperplasia due to lack of 21 beta hydroxylase, what is the purpose of administration of synthetic glucocorticoid? What do you think so? Is it to inhibit the aldosterone synthesis, to prevent the hypoglycemia, or to recover of the normal immune function, or to suppress the ACTH secretion? Of course, to suppress the ACTH secretion, because it is responsible for the hyperplasia and then responsible for the increase of adrenal sex steroids. Mangala has been diagnosed to have brain tumor. You would prefer to give her beta or dexamethasone or hydrocortisone as steroids to decrease her cerebral edema. Why? So because based off its property, you can answer yes. Betamethasone and dexamethasone have only anti-inflammatory property or glucocorticoid property and no mineralocorticoid activity. So therefore, they do not cause sodium and water retention. Therefore, for this property, it is used in the treatment of cerebral edema because of any reason. Okay. Okay, these are the references of this class. Thank you.